Paddle to the Sea, Chapter 16, 17, and 18. By Dog Sled to the Sow. Paddle stayed at the Coast Guard station until winter, and then Bill carried out a plan he had made. He telephoned a friend at the Sow. This is what people called Sault Ste. Marie, twin cities that lie one in Canada and one in Michigan, with the St. Mary's River as a boundary between. Ships cannot pass down the roaring rapids at this point. Instead, they go around the rapids by means of locks built like huge stairs, then follow St. Mary's River to Lake Huron. When the river freezes, the ship tie up at the Sioux to wait the spring breakup. When Bill's friend, the mate on the icebound freighter, answered the phone, the Coast Guard crew gathered around to listen. "Hello, Maloney? This is Bill. Say, after that last wreck, we picked up an Indian in a canoe." "Yeah, came 2,000 miles from Nipigon," and Bill swung the receiver so his pal could listen. "Jumpin' whitefish," boomed the voice. "How do you ever—" "Yeah," Bill continued, "he doesn't speak English. Now, sometime you'll be running to Buffalo. You're to take him in his canoe with you." "Hey!" the yell could be heard across the room. "My freighter don't take passengers. Engine to canoe, are you crazy?" "I'm sending with Pierre the trapper you're acquainted with. Goodbye," and Bill slammed down the receiver. "I guess it will worry him some," he chuckled, and everyone else roared. A few days later, Pierre tucked Paddle under his bundle of furs and was off for a 60-mile run by dog sled to the Sow. Chapter 17, Non-Stop Down Lake Michigan. At the Sow, Pierre found Maloney's oar boat. The mate was writing out a report when the trapper stepped into his cabin. "You!" exploded Maloney. "Get out and take that Indian with you!" "You take him in his canoe," drawled Pierre, setting Paddle on the desk. "What? Where?" gasped the mate. At dinner, he heard the whole story. "Well, you can tell Bill that Paddle goes to Buffalo with me, safe and sound," he laughed. When spring came, Maloney's ship moved into a huge concrete chamber with solid steel gates at both ends. Valves at the bottom let the water out slowly, and the big boat sank with the water level. Then the last gate opened, and Paddle was on his way down the St. Mary's River. But not this trip to Buffalo. 2 days later, Paddle had reached Gary, a city of steel mills at the south end of Lake Michigan. Here, Mate Mahoney scratched "Gary, Indiana," after the Sow on the paddle chopper plate and bundled him to a canvas seaman's bag with his soiled clothes. After unloading its iron ore, his ship went to go to dry dock for repairs, and he had to move to another of the steel company boats. While carrying the mate's luggage, a clumsy deckhand dropped the bag overboard, and waves washed it out of reach. Mate Mahoney made the air blue with words. How could he ever face Bill again? But it was no use. His ship was waiting. So Paddle was left behind, all tied up with shirts and socks in a sack. But worse, he was at the south end of Lake Michigan, off his direct route to the sea. Chapter 18, Paddle returns to the north. A week after leaving the boat at Gary, the well-soaked bag drifted ashore. Playful dogs tore it apart. A puppy carried Paddle up and down the beach, dropping at last to bark at a wave. Paddle was free again to explore the long beach that formed the southern end of Lake Michigan. Sand dunes rolled eastward along this Indian coast. Spring bathers covered the shores. Paddle escaped them all, though he was buried and uncovered many times by the waves. The lake shore curved, and lazy currents carried Paddle northward. The endless beach was littered with castaway things. Paddle was often tossed among heaps of pebbles, shells, fish bones, bottles, and barrels. All about were boxes, broken oars, timbers with twisted spikes and rusty chains, and sometimes the wreck of a ship that once had sailed. Summer found him halfway up the Michigan coast. He passed green meadows where cows stood in the brooks and horses kept to the shade. Hot breezes rippled the grain and windmills sang out of tune. Wagon loads of hail creaked into fat barns. Summer faded and autumn came. Vines were heavy with grapes and orchards were loaded with apples. Corn shocks made Indian teepees over the hills, and the coast glowed yellow and scarlet with fall colors. The fields gave way to pine forests. Nights were filled with the lonely cry of the loon. Paddle had traveled south through Lake Michigan in 2 days. It had taken him 3 seasons to return to the northern end of the lake on his way to the sea. Paddle to the Sea, chapter 16, 17, and 18.